All right, well, I guess we should get started, everyone. Welcome to our latest rendition, our workshop in digital scholarship. Um, we'll be recording this workshop and we will send the recording and handouts out to you after. If you did not RSV to me beforehand, please send me a quick email after the workshop is over. My email is gunn, Gunn, at cua.edu. So my name is Kevin Gunn and I am coordinator of digital scholarship. And I'm with my colleague Julie Loy, who
Hello.
instruction and reference librarian here at Catholic University of America Libraries. And we're going to be presenting today on the best practices for creating, displaying, and understanding visual data. So it will be a very quick overview of a lot of complicated stuff. So we're trying to make it a little bit simpler for all of you out there. So let's get right in. So our goals for today, um, I'm going to give you a quick overview of data visualization, just an idea what is all the sort of dimensions that you have to think about when you're putting together a particular data visualization project. We're going to be looking at types of data and how you can work with that data, and what the type of data that you have will determine to a certain extent what sort of visualization techniques that you can use. We'll then examine some common techniques for displaying data meaningfully. Lots out there. And we're also going to talk about the limitations and misuses of common techniques. So it's not only just a question of looking at data visualization per se, but there is an ethical dimension of working with a data visualization project. And there's also the concept of data literacy, of looking at what you're reading and on the web or wherever, and trying to ascertain critically what it is that the creator is trying to what information the creator is trying to pass on to you. So you'll see it's a lot complicated in that. We'll get to some basic concepts as we go through the workshop. Well, for those of you who are somewhat older, the guru, one of the big gurus at least of visualizing information, designing information, is Edward Tufty. So he's one of the oldest proponents of good visual displays. He brought data and design together in a print format. And while he works more or less in print format up to now, perhaps some of it is a little dated, but I still find that his books are quite relevant and valuable. Um, Regardless of where you get your information, good design is good design. And he talks quite a bit about how data and design should come together. So, what is data visualization? So remember, it's just not a pretty graph or pretty table or whatever that you have. There's a lot more going on in the background. So if you're looking at data visualization, with the rise of computers, you have a more robust, complex form of data visualization. So, you need to be cognizant of the interaction between data, the computer, and the human being. It's very important. So data visualization is high bandwidth connection between data on a computer system and a human brain, facilitated by visual communication. So what does this mean? Well, you're dealing with data acquisition, you're dealing with data processing. How do you process the data once you acquire it? How you display that data? And you can be very successful in these three endeavors and still fail to communicate a message. So you need to be aware of human perception, human memory, and also human cognition. So looking at a good example that came up a few years ago. Do you remember the dress? Is it gold? Is it blue? A lot of debate about that, right? Even though we're essentially looking at the same image. So human perception and psychology play a role in data visualization. So human beings evolved to see in daylight, but daylight changes color. So how, the photograph, the pixel in the photograph can play an effect on our vision as well. You know, so there's all these different filters, dimensions that you have to consider when you're looking at human perception. There are other examples too that you can think of. I mentioned the dress here too, but you can a similar one that sort of made the rounds was the whole idea of the shoe. You know, was it teal or was it gray? Was it silver? Was it white? Silver, white, or teal, gray? That sort of thing. One particular scientist used an example of how you could put together different components, parts to create a photograph. In this case, you have a photograph of strawberries, but there's no red in the strawberries. So he sort of showed the illusion of color constancy, where parts of the strawberries are actually gray, but when put together, they show red. And it's interesting, you know, while we can debate whether the dress was blue or gold, with regards to the strawberries here, we all see the red. You know, there's not really any exception there unless you're colorblind or whatever, but there you have the concept of color constancy. So there's a lot of different ways you can look at these particular illusions, if you will, that will affect how you present your data visually. So what is the value of data visualization? Well, a number of things that you should be aware of. For first of all, exploration, you know, what is the story that's in your data? Do we have numbers in columns and rows? You know, what can they tell us? You know, what can we extract from that? What's the explanation? Do we know the numbers, and, you know, do they suggest a story to us? Maybe they don't. Maybe they're just numbers. You know, they don't have any pattern or anything. You know, we have tons of data. How can we put it together coherently so that we can explore and explain? Okay, big data is a big concept, big problem. Science and other areas. When you're looking at data visualization, you know, it helps us to see those relationships in the data that we would not otherwise see. So it pulls something out, makes it visually delightful, if you will. You want to not distort the visualization. What's the motivation of the creator? You know, they're sharing, questioning, promoting, selling. What exactly is it that the creator wants to communicate to you? So, you know, as librarians, we talk about information literacy and how, you know, you want to make sure that you're using the right databases, that you're using the right sources, the scholarly sources, so you get good quality information, peer review articles, that sort of thing. Well, there is a like-minded component with that with regards to data literacy as well. You have to question what it is that you're looking at constantly, and we'll help you today with some questions that you can ask. And then, of course, there's always the audience expectation. You know, what does the audience need to be successful in understanding what you're looking at? You know, how much detail is necessary? And we'll show you some examples of graphs and charts where there's just too much detail and the message gets lost, completely lost. You know, you also have to look at things like cultural assumptions and colors and icons, that sort of thing, right? So you have a lot to consider moving forward.
Okay, so 3 modes of visualization. There's presentation, interactive, and interactive storytelling. So we're gonna kind of go through several examples. Actually, we're going to be looking at several COVID-19 dashboards and infographics that have just sprung up upon various groups. So with presentation, Kevin, can you advance my slide? Thank you. So presentation usually involves just kind of like a slideshow or something like this. This right here is a pretty basic infographic that was created by David McCandless. He is from the UK, and he has a website called Information is Beautiful. I encourage you all to check it out. And he's just kind of taking data and just kind of going and creating this visualizations. This one kind of is more presentation mode because it's not really intended to be interactive or anything like that. There's no like user input or anything like that. And it's pretty much just kind of used for communication. So you can see it's the coronavirus riskiest activities. It goes from low risk, medium to high risk, pretty basic. Not a lot of interaction happening right now. Next slide. Okay. So there it pops up right there. So interactive visualization, this is actually coming from Center for Disease Control, their dashboard for data visualizations that they create, and it's going to keep on going. It's a GIF, but it's but it's fascinating because it is it's using some amount of discovery for our users, and it's not just static. There's something happening here. And I also encourage you to check out the CDC's data visualizations because they have a lot of these examples there. They also have pretty basic presentation ones as well. And look at the data. I mean, you can see the graphs are go from 341 all the way down. But they're also, the numbers that they're coming up with are matching the graphs, the bar graphs, and how they should be. The numbers aren't skewed or the graphs aren't skewed that way either. So pretty good data visualization. Okay, next slide. So this one takes it a step further and tells more of a story. So the user should be able to kind of, like I said, get a story out of it. And this is actually, this is coming from Johns Hopkins, their daily COVID video. And it's actually taking various data sets and kind of looking at all of them. It looks at new cases, tested, and positivity ratio. And Johns Hopkins is creating these visualizations every single day to show kind of what's going on across the country and the world. So. So again, you kind of saw like the various like infographics and kind of how each kind of laid out a story. And then they, at the very end, they kind of like showed the positivity rates and kind of the trends amongst the states and various countries around the world. So again, I also encourage you to check out their resource center because it has a lot of visualizations and things to show.
So what it is, we need to step back a little bit and just ask yourself a very basic question: what is data? Data, as you can see, can be all these different things: facts, numbers, quantities, information, graphs, measurement observations. So what story you're going to tell would depend on your data to a large extent. So what is data? These data objects and actions listed here. So it's very broad, very much not very specific in that sense. You're looking at various numbers that you can be working with. You can be looking at particular data objects and that sort of thing. So I think for most of us, we've probably talked about variables with regards to types of data. So you need to understand the types of variables that you have within your particular data set. This understanding is important as it will determine to a certain degree the type of visualization you use. So you can look at ordinal data, data that's in the logical sequence like gold, silver, bronze. You can look at categorical data that belongs in the same category, North America, Europe, that sort of thing. You have nominal and discrete data. So nominal being two or more categories, but which do not have an intrinsic order, for example, shapes. And then discrete data, you have that as numeric, that has a countable number of values between any two values. So the number of siblings, for example. And then you have a continuous data. So data that is numeric, that has an infinite number of values between any two values. So you can look at height, that sort of thing. We actually have an example of these types of data.
Yeah, so this is from Jordan Vincent, and what he did is he took a look at overnight stays in US national parks, and he combined ordinal, categorical, and quantitative data together. And actually, Kevin, can you go to the next slide?
Next slide, sure.
Thank you. So these are, so the bigger circles represent like the various national parks. And then what he did is he took ordinal data such as the months, and this one doesn't have it, but January starts here and goes all the way through December. And then for categorical data, he took the information about accommodations, so like lodging, backcountry, use of a tent or an RV represents these kind of squiggles right here within the circle. And then also, I don't know if anyone noticed, but with the months and the seasons represented here, the red represents the warmer temperatures. And then the white right here represents the colder temperatures. So then this is our key that we have provided here. So we're going to just take a look at two examples of these three types of variables. Okay, so with this first one, this actually shows the months right here, and it goes starts in January, goes all the way through December. So with this one, we definitely see red here, kind of more so. So we can infer that this is probably like a place that has warmer temperatures. And one of the things I noticed is that the lodging seems to be pretty consistent. I mean, we do have year round. So I'm thinking that it's probably going to be an area that, doesn't necessarily have really big temperature swings. So people can probably have those accommodations year round. And I will tell you that this is actually a national park in Hawaii. So that's where it is. Obviously, Hawaii is a warmer climate, so you can see that that there is that red right there. So definitely taking those three types of data right there is really helping us try and pinpoint where this could possibly be. So here's another example. Kind of a big clue is the fact that the red is like kind of spread really, really far throughout the year. So it's probably even someplace warmer than Hawaii. And one of the things I noticed is I think it's RV and lodging are the only type of accommodations that we have. So so it has to be maybe a place that maybe we can't necessarily go out backcountry and maybe in a tent, maybe. Um, and it's actually in the Virgin Islands, a park down there. So definitely matches up with our temperature. So there are two examples of kind of using those variables of data kind of together, and coming up with places where you can look out under the stars. Um, so yeah, next slide.
Okay, so looking at your variables, your data, you can organize it through this nice chart is helpful in looking at your discrete data, your continuous data, and then looking at it from ordered point of view or an unordered point of view. So you begin to see how this can be organized under, if it's ordered and discrete, then it's going to be ordinal data, or it's going to be quantitative in that sense. If it's discrete, but it's unordered, then it'll be nominal, or you'll be dealing with categories as you go forward. So nominal with different shapes, or categories with nationality, for example. If you're looking at continuously ordered, you're looking at fields, and that's a common thing here with regards to altitude, temperature, that sort of thing. If you're looking at continuous but unordered, then you're looking at cyclic values, and examples of that would be like directions and hues and that. So basically what it comes down to, for starters anyway, is that you want to look at your dependent and independent variables. So how do they, your variable is going to relate to each other. So your dependent variable is what you measure in the experiment and what is affected during the experiment. So in the scientific experiment, you simply don't have a dependent variable without an independent variable, a dependent variable without an independent variable. With regards to an independent variable, it's what you have control over, and it's what you manipulate in order to see what sort of effects you get on the dependent variable. So for a very simple example, if you're interested in how stress affects heart rate in humans, you would isolate your variables. In this case, the independent variable would be stress of a type, and then dependent variable would be your heart rate. You would manipulate the value and then whatever it is to be measured. And then you want to graph that and put it on a simple graph with an x-axis, y-axis type thing. So here's a very basic example. Well, as basic as you can get here, comparing stress and heart rate. So, working out with weights, increasing the pounds and when you're weightlifting, and as you increase the pounds in continuous motion, your heart rate is going to go up if you're doing it right. So you see a little bit of a simple working together of independent and the dependent variables. So what are some of the popular types of charts we can use? Well, we're just going to focus on charts here right now for the most common, it's most common type of data visualization format. I think you should keep in mind though that you can have maps, animation, dashboards, infographics. Those can be very useful for your data, but they are going to require more skill sets. So if you're doing something in infographics or dashboards, perhaps you may want to have some understanding of art design. If you're working with maps, then working with just geographical information systems is something that you probably should have going forward. So we're going to do a quick look here at charts. We're going to look at bar charts, line charts, pie charts, scatter plots, Gantt charts, and the table as well.
Okay, so bar charts. Um, so these can be used for comparing quantitative data from several categories. I know that we have an example kind of, well, on the next slide of 2 different years, and then actually using multiple emissions from showcasing like the amount. Oh yeah, here it is. Okay, so here we have comparing the 2 years, 2006 and 2014, and then we also are looking at park operation emissions. Down here at the bottom, you can see energy, transportation, waste. So that's, looking at several categories and also like looking over changes over time and things like that. Good example. So line charts tend to be quantitative, but continuous for the dependent and the independent variable. So if we go to the next slide. Okay, so this is looking at global surface temperature, but when I mean continuous, if you look at the bottom, it goes from, I think it's 1880 all the way to 2010. That's a good way of showing that continuous through the years as an example. I'm trying to, yep, values, yeah, showing values over time. Okay, so the next one we have is a pie chart. And pie charts are good for showing a whole part, comparing parts of a whole. And this one's pretty good. It's pretty accurate. You usually start with the largest area first and kind of go, around to show those smaller areas. Okay, next. So here we go. So here's a good example of, again, that large area, and it's going to show parts of a whole by representing like 100, 100%, but also looking at various things, for example, Mount Rainier, deferred maintenance. So it's literally all in the same, I guess, category, but it's just looking at that part of a whole. Okay, next.
Okay, so another type of chart that you can look at are scatter plots. You'll notice that the quantitative independent variable is compared with another quantitative independent variable. So scatter plots usually rely mostly on position, but the clusters can also yield density as well. So it depends on what it is that you want to demonstrate. They're really good for quantitative comparisons, exploring the relationships between two data sets, that sort of thing. And of course, we've all seen this type of a scatter plot with a linear regression line here as well. Another thing that you're probably familiar with is the whole idea of Gantt charts. So you have a discrete nominal independent variable, and that's compared with a quantitative independent variable. So you're looking at, probably the most common type of use of this is usually with regards to the various stages of a project that's working on. So an example of that is this particular tracking action, how much time it takes, the time of the project, and usually the person's assigned to the action moving forward across time. So a good way to collect data in that sense, but there's other ways that you can do it as well. Another thing that you can use are tables, and these tables are quite useful for comparing independent variables that are either discrete or nominal. So they get a lot of use, and they benefit from the position only. As an aside, when you're talking about data visualization, going back to human perception, do you sort of notice the dots between the lines here? Right, there's what's called lateral inhibition flashing. So if you look at this, long enough, you're going to see those dots between there. And that's something you have to consider. Do I want to have those dots in there, or maybe I need to spread my cells in my table further apart? So that's just a quick example. And of human perception impacting what you're looking at. You also have, here's an example of a table here, how many Smarties are in a box. So you can break it out through numbers, colors, and then the frequency listed here. All right, so our next slide is build your own chart. And Julie's gonna send out in chat a nice little handout. And what this chart demonstrates is from the Pew Research Center, and they are surveying social media habits. And there's a quick little, they've done it for a number of years now. And the question is, what do you use in terms of social media? And, they have Pinterest, LinkedIn, Facebook, that sort of thing, Twitter and Instagram. And here you are, you have some numbers. It's a nice little table that you have here, a percentage of what people used who are surveyed. And so what you sort of have to do with your data is to extract the pattern, the story that you want to look at. So what are you looking for? Trends, broad social media trends across these 5 platforms? Are you looking at a big number here? For example, Facebook has 79% listed here. Look at that, leaves everyone else in the dust. Is that what you want to focus on? Do you want to look at correlations? So, is Pinterest and LinkedIn started at the same point in 2014, but now they're up. Pinterest, I keep saying that wrong, is slightly higher than LinkedIn. Can we draw some conclusions from that? You can also compare different social media platforms as well. Then you can just take all of it and just look at it. How do they change over time? So different ways that you can look at that. If you look at the handout, you'll notice these are pulled from a book by Kristen Briney called Effective Data Visualization. So, once you've got that data, how do you want to present this visually? So once you decide, are you looking at a single number, for example, that big Facebook number, 79%, then maybe you want to look at an icon array or a pie chart or some type of bar column chart, for example. And I'm not going to list everything here in the handout, but it mentions different ways that you can present, beating a benchmark, parts of a whole, change over time, that sort of thing. The second page also has, how do I make the chart? So if you're looking at, say, a big number, you can use PowerPoint for that. So the image consists of your message with the number that's really big, and maybe all the other numbers are small and put in the corner or something like that. And the handout is very nice. It'll give you some hints about how to use it and when to use it, that sort of thing. So it's a way of looking at your data and considering how you want to visually explore it. So if we were in an in-person workshop right now, we would have you work on that, and we'd have a nice long conversation about how you can present it. Since we're not, I'm just going to go on to our next slide here. If you really, really, really want to get in the deep end here and really explore how you want to represent your data visually, I highly recommend taking a look at the data visualization catalog. If you're not familiar with this now, hey, today was worth the price of coming just to see this website. And it is really great. I did a little screenshot here. I gave just a small number of the types of ways then you can present your data here. And what I've got here is a typical example of a page. So what can I say? I lack imagination. I picked a bar chart, and what it does is wonderful. It shows you what a bar chart looks like. It shows you the description of it. You'll break it down to you, the different parts of it if you're not too sure what it is. It'll also tell you the different functions. So comparison, for example, if that's what you want to do, patterns, that sort of thing. You can click on these particular buttons and they'll take you to other types of data visualization techniques that you can use. So very, very helpful. And they'll also suggest, here's some similar charts that you want to use. So if you want to use a pyramid, it really stimulates the imagination and looking at the different ways that you can take a simple data set, if you will, and then seeing all the different ways that you can present it. And then if you're feeling super adventurous, it gives you the tools for how to generate the visualization. So Excel, I think there's going to be Excel represented in most cases, but you have all these different little software packages that you can use in order to do that. So there you go. Before we move on, let's see. Yeah, there you go. Okay, good. Thank you very much. I'm just looking at the chats. All right, we'll move on to our next slide. So, okay, so we've given you a lot of things to consider, and you're going to have to explore on your own what it is that you want to do. Now what we're going to look at is the sort of like the ethical side of data visualization. So I'll be back to you, Julie.
Okay. So yeah, definitely looking at some examples listed right here about common mistakes and things that we should look out for, especially not only ethically but also data literacy as well too. So next slide, thank you. So this one, and a lot of these examples are coming from Nathan Yao, and he has a great website too. I can probably put it in the chat as well. So truncated accesses. Let me go to full screen. Sorry about that. So clearly, this is showing on the right here that it's 0, and over here is 10. We definitely don't want it to start at 10. Definitely want it to start at 0. So that is something to always look out for. Next slide. Okay, so this one takes it even a step further, and it's still, we're seeing 0 on the one side and 10 on the other side. And it's almost like they're with the dual axes, they're maybe trying to wanting us to infer something else about the data because the axes are off. Next slide, thank you. So here's another one, the use of a pie chart. This one is definitely, the slices are very, very wrong. We're also seeing source opinions dynamic. Definitely looking at that, being aware of where the source of the data is coming from. And it just, these percentages just don't add up necessarily. Next slide. This one, so yeah, you're kind of looking at the same map and it's like a geography map altogether. So you're just kind of like, what are we actually looking at here? But yeah, so being mindful of the various, maybe if you were looking at a geographical map, kind of making sure that it's one, accurate, two, and not using it for various things of magazines across the board. So, okay, so limited scope right here. I think they were looking at daily temperatures from 1964 to 2013. And clearly they've highlighted 1993 because it's like, I guess 1993 was a very cold year, but it's kind of like limiting, you're not looking at the whole thing, you're just kind of highlighting at 1993, not taking into account all the other years. Okay, so this one, definitely we want to see that variation of right here on this side is going from 0 to 10 and not just kind of like 0 and then 1 plus. Um, it's just not accurate. Next slide.
Okay. So this slide demonstration of what you pay for electricity and how is it subsidized. You'll notice from the circles, the takeaway is from the circles are listed here, and you can see from a large amount here all the way down to a very small dot here. But in fact, that misrepresents. It looks like, that the numbers are accurate, but the visual display is not. It's much more accurate for the bubbles to be, the bubbles here are correctly sized by area, proportionate to the square root of the radius and all that. So you see here, the contrast is not that great between this low carbon capture and then the renewable energy spot, so you can see how that information is displayed. Another version of that is area dimensions. So here you have, two images. They both demonstrate the same amount of area. However, a square and then a long thin line, visually, we look at that and we go, oh, I think it's the square that's much more represented, much larger and all that, when in fact they're both the same. Another component is an unnecessary extra dimension. So here's an abuse of a pie chart. To put it quite simply, if you're looking at this particular data right here, there's too many slices, and frankly, the legend is just too complicated, too much going on here. I'm sure all the numbers are accurate, but what is the message that you want to display here? You can take 1, 2, 3, the 4, the blue, the green, the sort of gold, and the red, but after that, everything else just sort of melts away from this. So too much going on in this one. You're all no doubt familiar with the White House map of 2016 presidential election that made the news way back when. So you had that particular map showing, the perception that Republicans had won a lot of most of the country. But what it actually does is that it conflates geography with people. So it is true that the large swaths of red throughout the country are correctly painted red. They are sparsely populated, as we know. So the shape of the administrative geography drawn up, coupled with a particular symbol scheme, created a map where red dominates in a visual way, but not with the numbers of people represented in that. And just to give you an idea, I really love showing this map because if you check out the thematic maps of the 2016 presidential election, Kenneth Field did this. And what he did is he took the exact same data and he just represented it differently using these different types of maps. And as you can see, some of them are really neat and some not so impressive. So definitely take a look at that website just to get how you can take like one map, same data, and get really different visual displays on that. So that's a good takeaway there. And now to Julie to wrap up.
Okay, so what I like about this visualization is I feel like it kind of represents, well, one, a very good one, in that you have the various components of data, having reliable data, timely, and then you kind of look at the design aspects. You want to have good readable data. What are the themes, color and fonts? Are they Are they going to be good for your audience? And then the story component, I know that we looked at that COVID-19, looking at the daily trends, and kind of seeing the daily trends and kind of what that means. What kind of message are you sending in your story? Are you gonna try and like get people excited and a call to action about the visualization that you have? So those are some things to consider. And then shareability. I know, with Johns Hopkins, their whole COVID dashboard has gotten so sophisticated with just kind of starting out with that global map of everything. And now it's like a resource center. So it has a lot of various dashboards and information about the data being collected and things like that. And also social media is something else to consider. I know that we see a lot of infographics on social media and things like that. And also, how accessible is it? You want to have access to these types of things. I know Tableau, which is like a really great thing to use for more sophisticated data visualizations. They actually have like a public one specifically for COVID. So anyone can actually look at that one. And obviously they want it to be shareable. And then of course you can get your own access to Tableau. But I thought that was interesting that they had like a public format so that people could actually see it. So I think that pretty much wraps up kind of like data visualization and what you can do with it, and maybe even your students as well. So these are just some sources that we have. We also have a page for additional readings. And if you go to that page, we actually have a Google Doc with even more stuff because there's a lot out there. So we encourage you. I think Kevin is going to send out this information. So I definitely encourage you to take a look at the sources that we've compiled.
Yeah. Yeah. The recording and as well as the presentation slides and that. So tons of information. So do we have any questions? You can unmute or you can use the chat.
Hi, this is Ruby. My question is, you guys have presented us with great information about how we can go about doing the data visualization, but I was wondering whether there's actual hands-on training about the more interesting ones, the ones that go beyond Excel and yeah.
Yes, yes. Are we offering training right now? Not this semester, but I would ask that you contact me off here. Just send me an email and we can talk shop. How's that? We can talk. You can tell me about your data and then we can experiment.
Yeah, sounds good.
With it. Yeah. So, I mean, yeah. Once you
maybe
take a look
towards the end of the semester, because right now everyone is swamped.
Yeah, tell me about it. Oh, look at the data visualization catalog. And I'm sorry, but you'll probably feel a little overwhelmed when you look at it. So my advice to anyone is spend a lot of time just experimenting and seeing what you can do with it. But yeah, I'm definitely available for research consultations on any sort of topic on that. Thank you.
Sounds good. Thank you.
Thank you, Joseph, for adding to our chat.
Yes. Well, thank you, everyone. Yeah, if we don't have any more questions, Thank you very much for coming. We've done this presentation before and we keep improving it and adding new things and that. So
Yeah, and
hope you had a
definitely,
good time.
doing it via virtual was
Yes.
definitely unique. So
Yes. A new thing. Yes. Thanks very
yeah,
much. All right. Well, thank you very much, everyone.
thank you.
Have a great day.